At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV! Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free.
The truth is our secret.
It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
Let's be honest. Buying cannabis shouldn't be complicated, sketchy, or low quality. That's why I want to tell you about Mood.com. That's MOOD.com. Mood ships federally legal cannabis straight to your door. No medical card, no hassle. And here's the kicker. The quality is better than anything you'll find at your local dispensary. Yeah, I said it. Whether you're into edibles, concentrates, flower, or just looking to explore, you'll find it all at Mood. And it's not just the variety that makes them stand out. Every product is sourced from small, American-owned family farms that care deeply about what they grow. It's cannabis you can trust, delivered discreetly, and ready to elevate your mood. And because you're a listener, you get 20% off your first order. Just head to Mood.com. That's MOOD.com to get started.
The Middle is supported by Journalism Funding Partners, a nonprofit organization striving to increase the sustainability of local journalism by building connections between donors and news organizations. More information on how you can support The Middle at listentothemiddle.com. Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ Tolliver. And of course, you can watch us live on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch, although Tolliver, maybe not TikTok for very long because it's about to get banned in the next few days.
Boo! You know, it was the best of times. It was the demurest of times. Thanks for the memories.
The memories. Okay, well, the other thing that is happening in the coming days is that Donald Trump will once again be president of the United States, something that many Americans view as devastating to U.S. democracy, not least because of Trump's unwillingness to accept the election results 4 years ago and his role in what happened on January 6th, 2021. So this hour, we want to know if you think democracy is really in danger because of Trump's return to the White House. Our number is 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. And we'll get to your calls in a moment. But first, last week, we asked you what should happen now with the U.S. support of Ukraine. Here are some of the calls that came in after the show.
Well, this is Bill Shire from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. This is not just about the Ukraine. It's about Poland, the Baltic republics, one country after another. Vladimir Putin wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union and, going further back in history, the Russian Empire.
NATO and the U.S. should defend Ukraine from Russia. Ukraine must be defended and allowed to join NATO, no matter the cost.
Hi, I'm Manny Marotta. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. The war is about what it's always been, pride.
And I think that if the solution is found where both Putin and Trump and NATO, if they all find a solution that can find them pride, then the war can end without further loss of life or territory on either side, if there is simply a maintenance of pride. And I think that is what Trump and Putin should be focusing on in their upcoming negotiations.
Well, thanks to everyone who called in, and you can hear that entire episode on our podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. So now to our topic this hour: is democracy really at risk as Trump retakes the White House? And by the way, I want to hear from you if you think it is at risk or if you think that these concerns are overblown. Tolliver, can you give us the number again, please?
Yeah, it's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com. You can also comment on our new live stream on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch.
Let's meet our panel. Political commentator Andrew Sullivan, who writes the Weekly Dish Substack and hosts the companion podcast, joins us. Andrew, welcome to The Middle.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
And Clemson University historian Vernon Burton joins us as well. Vernon, great to have you back on The Middle.
It's great to be back with you, Jeremy.
So before we get to the phones, let me speak to each of you. Andrew, do you think democracy is at risk with Trump coming back into the White House?
Not seriously at risk. Look, we just had a big election, big turnout, and he won. It's very hard to argue that a big Democratic victory is somehow the demise of democracy. It just becomes surreal when you start talking that way. Now, what might he do in office? Who knows? And we can't rule out the risk given the things that he said in the past. But I find myself not as worried this time as I was in 2016, and partly because we have been through this before, and we know he didn't do it before. And so the chances of him getting away with it now are pretty small. Also, just as a very obvious fact, he has a 5-seat majority in the House of Representatives so far, which may well go down. It's
lower now, right? Because of some people that have been taken out of the House to go into his administration.
Yes, so it may come down to 2 or 1 or 2 in the end. It's just really hard to be a tyrant with a 2-seat majority in the House. And you'd be lucky, especially when your party is as divided as his is. I think he's at a high watermark now, and we'll see what'll take place.
Vernon Burton, what do you think? And give us the historic context. Have there been moments in the past? Obviously, we think about the Civil War as a moment when everything was at risk. But are there moments that you compare this to, and how does this stack up for you?
Yes, and I think, Jeremy, that we need to realize the question should be, democracy always has been at risk, and people understood that. You know, the famous quote by most historians is with Ben Franklin when a woman asked him, well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarch? And Franklin replied, a republic if you can keep it. And this has to be put in the context. The decline and fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbon was hot off the presses in the 1770s. And his account of how the Roman Republic slipped into tyranny when powerful men had seduced or intimidated citizens, so they became a stampeding mob hungry for bread and they were worried about it. The founders worried about it. Lincoln worried about it. And I think what's interesting is we have not worried about it very much since, and I think we should have, because democracy has never been static. I will say that this period parallels more closely the Civil War Reconstruction era than in so many ways than ever before. My main concern is belief in the rule of law. We started with the idea of the rule of law. People forget that the Declaration, which is not part of the Constitution, that has all men are created equal, that it was actually written to explain the rule of law of why a revolution was necessary so that people could live under the laws and be governed by them. And I guess my greatest concern is, will the rule of law be used to undermine the rule of law? And there have been a number of issues. I read an article. My co-author of Justified wrote another article about the Supreme Court's use there. But in general, we haven't seen law used to go after people as enemies per se. So if that doesn't happen, I will feel pretty comfortable and agree with Andrew. But that would be my main concern there.
On On that point, Andrew, about the rule of law, we just had the president-elect's nominee for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, in her hearing, wouldn't say that Biden won the 2020 election. And was asked about, going after some of Trump's political enemies with the rule of law. What are you worried about that aspect?
Well, I think the Democrats would have a stronger case if they hadn't persecuted Trump with the political use of the rule of law, specifically the Alvin Bragg case, which was clearly an attempt to politically manipulate the law to prosecute this guy because the DA didn't like him, and because the DA would get popularity in New York City if he indicted him. He ginned up this fake charge, turning a misdemeanor into a felony. I mean, the whole thing was obviously corrupt. So it's not as if we're starting from a position in which one side is sticking to the rule of law and the other side isn't. They did everything they could to use the rule of law to get rid of Trump. And I hope he doesn't do the same thing in return. But it's clear that that's what happened. The three other cases, of course, are more legitimate. But again, when you're using the legal process to circumvent a political process like impeachment, you are, I think, twisting the rule of law in ways that are dangerous. And no one points this out when the Democrats do it, but everybody's extremely upset if Trump were to do it.
Let's get a call in before the break here. Ryan is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Ryan, welcome to the middle. Go ahead. Do you think democracy is at risk?
I think that Trump's recent election adds to the endangerment of democracy, but I think this question is almost 40 years too late. I think we really should have started asking, is democracy in danger, as we started seeing deindustrialization hollow out places like Peoria, Illinois, or Flint, Michigan, and you started seeing jobs going overseas and the middle class rapidly shrinking. I think that was a much more intense and immediate threat to the fabric of democracy in this country. And Trump is just adding to a process that's been underway for almost 2 generations now. I think we really have to focus on the economic issues when we want to think about, is democracy under threat? And Trump is more of a symptom than necessarily a cause.
So you're saying that just the decline of the middle class is the threat to democracy?
I think the biggest threat to democracy is people's, the ability to pay the bills, keep themselves in their homes, and feed themselves. This is comparable to Weimar Germany in the 1920s. If people can't feed themselves, if people can't keep themselves in their homes and think about tomorrow as potentially better or as stable as today, then they stop thinking about things like democracy because they have to really focus on survival.
Ryan, thank you very much for that. Vernon Burton, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a really good point there. And I think it goes back that our generation, we have sort of thought of Martin Luther King Jr.'s "the arc of moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And we forget that Martin Luther King Jr. was a theologian, and he's talking about the end times, even quotes in that same great speech, of course, he's talking about John on Patmos and the end times, as opposed to, as he says very clearly, we have to be doing something. And, I take my view as a person of faith the same way, that ultimately justice is going to be okay, but we have to do things here. And I do think there's a slight difference from what Andrew was saying on the state case versus the threat of using the federal government to go after enemies. I'm hoping it will not happen, but I do think that is something that will really undermine our belief in the rule of law. And particularly, I worry that the Supreme Court, when it basically said that the president is above the law, that is, it's not quite that, but the idea, it goes against the sort of historical understanding that no one is above the law. And with that kind of ruling, I think it, with a lot of others, it has undermined a lot of people's faith in.
I gotta stop you right there, Vernon Burton, because Tolliver, the claims about Trump being a threat to democracy go right up to the top.
Yeah, here's President Biden delivering remarks to supporters about a year ago in Pennsylvania.
Whether democracy is still America's sacred cause is the most urgent question of our time. And it's what the 2024 election is all about. The choice is clear. Donald Trump's campaign is about him, not America, not you. Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy. We must be clear. Democracy is on the ballot.
Well, and the people knew that, Tolliver, and they still voted for Trump. So there we go. And by the way, we are going to be doing a live new special show in just a few days on Inauguration Night. The podcast will drop the next morning, but we hope you'll tune in for that as well. And we'll be right back with more of The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Let's be honest. Buying cannabis shouldn't be complicated, sketchy, or low quality. That's why I want to tell you about Mood.com. That's MOOD.com. Mood ships federally legal cannabis straight to your door. No medical card, no hassle. And here's the kicker. The quality is better than anything you'll find at your local dispensary. Yeah, I said it. Whether you're into edibles, concentrates, flower, or just looking to explore, you'll find it all at Mood. And it's not just the variety that makes them stand out. Every product is sourced from small, American-owned family farms that care deeply about what they grow. It's cannabis you can trust, delivered discreetly, and ready to elevate your mood. And because you're a listener, you get 20% off your first order. Just head to Mood.com, that's MOOD.com, to get started.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here and my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, and philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. We are also available as a podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. This hour, we're asking you, is democracy really at risk? Tolliver, what is the number of people to call in?
It's 844-4-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on social media. Yeah.
I'm joined by political commentator Andrew Sullivan of The Weekly Dish and Clemson University history professor Vernon Burton. And before we get back to the phones, Andrew, what about the press and the role of the media? We've seen, obviously, over the last many years, newspapers disappear. We've seen a lot of people get their information from these large tech firms like Meta and X that are not operating like normal news organizations. They're clearly trying to stay in good graces with the incoming administration. Are the media up to the task of safeguarding our democracy to the extent that a free press does that?
If they want to. I mean, it's perfectly possible to print the news and to challenge people in government. There's nothing stopping them. We still have a First Amendment. I think some of this, and considering what the media has been over the last 10 years, if you think about how they have been lecturing us, controlling us, telling us how to live our lives incessantly, a woke agenda imposed from the top with no democratic input whatsoever, the idea that the only threat to democracy is coming from the right is just silly. And when you hear Biden say democracy is on the ballot, just think about what he just said. Democracy is on the ballot? Democracy is the ballot. This is not Weimar. We do not have 1,000% inflation and 30% unemployment. We have an incredibly low unemployment number. We have strong growth, stronger than any other country in the world. The question with democracy is, are we going to continue to have elections? Are we continue to be able to choose who represents us? Yes, we will. Now, there's another question about liberal democracy, which is that do we have the institutions to make sure that democracy doesn't become the tyranny of the majority? And that's a question that the press has to focus on. But I think we're losing track of what democracy is. I think we're losing perspective on the moment we're in. And for all Trump's insane pronouncements, he's so much, and has proven, his bark has been so much bigger than his bite. We've already been through this for 4 years.
Vernon Burton, what about that argument? Andrew has said that now a couple of times that Trump was president before. We've been through this for 4 years. There was still an election. I mean, he didn't show up to the inauguration, but the democracy did continue after the first Trump term.
Yes, and I think Andrew was right to say that gives us a pause to consider. I think that things will continue. As I said, I really believe we should have been worried about democracy long before there was Donald Trump. And I was actually going to throw this to both you and Andrew because you are the media now. And remember Walter Cronkite's sort of famous saying, if I can paraphrase it, the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy. But one of the big changes that I have seen in my lifetime is this idea. Well, if you think about with Lincoln, people knew at the time that the newspapers were political parties. The parties owned the newspapers. And, we probably don't have time. One of my favorite stories is in 1858, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and you have to come down briefly. The Democratic Party said Lincoln was totally inebriated and drunk. Remember, he was president of the Temperance Society. He gave the most incoherent and terrible speech, and his followers had to carry him out. He was so unable to walk, whereas the Whig paper said it was the greatest, most inspiring speech of all time, and his supporters put him on their shoulders and hurrah and carried him out in triumph. And the only thing that they agreed on was that he was carried out. Now, but people reading those papers knew those papers were
slanted,
owned by a political party.
Right.
And I think that's a major difference today. We can all point to the other people looking at the one that we don't look at and say, oh, they're looking at a biased one. But I think this is something people need to learn to think critically again. And I'll just do one hobby horse about democracy. We don't teach civics anymore in most schools, and even history is being challenged and not put the emphasis on it. And I'm not trying to, we really need STEM education, but everybody believes in that, and yet you really need the humanities, civics, and history political science to understand how government works.
Well, it's
Talking about the
amazing.
media,
Go ahead,
Jeremy,
Andrew.
over the last 10 years, all the major media establishment moved so far to the left, became essentially mouthpieces for the Biden administration, deliberately concealed the fact that he was incompetent as president, was unable to even function as president, put every news story through the prism of critical race theory and critical queer theory and critical gender theory. They are the most partisan press we've ever had. NPR is the most biased institution media in the country.
This is how you know this is how you know the middle is different, because Andrew is on NPR stations and he's saying that right now. Okay, anyway.
Jeremy, I just had a quick question.
X, for all its flaws, gives you something different. That's why it's successful. The Substack world, the places that are actually offering real journalism, unlike the New York Times, unlike NPR, which are essentially become propaganda channels for the left, are doing really well. We're booming. Not that we're right-wingers so much, but we haven't adopted the mentality that has been imposed as an actual policy across all these major media groups to defend and advance what they call social justice at the expense of every other value in journalism. They have lied to us again and again. We know it. We've seen it. So I think we were already in a 19th century situation. And the more different outlets, the better. And people need to, they shouldn't be spoon-fed their news. They need to figure it out for themselves. That's what a democracy really is. And it is a diversity of views. It's a diversity of newspapers. And that I think we're doing better with now than we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
I will say,
doesn't democracy depend on an educated citizenry?
Yes, of course, but that doesn't. But you think, but that applies to every sort of media. You might the biased media of NPR or the biased media of Fox News.
I'm just gonna say one thing as somebody who's been working in public radio since I was a child. I do believe in public radio. I do think that it should be credible across the political spectrum. And I agree with you, Andrew, that at many times in recent years, it has not lived up to that. But that's what we're trying to do here. So let's get to another call. And Emmett is in the Bay Area in California and is 17. Emmett, tell us, what do you think about democracy and whether it's at risk?
I think it's very interesting that the two people on this call or on the radio are talking about education, because I currently I just took an AP government course. I'm taking an AP economics course, and for my free time and when I drive, I listen to The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich on audiobook by William L. Shirer, who's considered one of the most profound historians on the rise of Nazism. And so where I recently left off is during the Weimar era, after the failed beer hall putsch, Hitler's turn was to take over through the democratic nature of Germany. And so I think that while I'm not saying Trump is Hitler by any means, I'm saying that it is possible to take over a democracy through democratic nature. And I think that through some of the people that Donald Trump is appointing, they're yes men. And I'm afraid that there won't be that democratic safeguards to stop. I'm not saying that right now Donald Trump will end democracy, but it's there for the taking if he'd like it. And I think that it's very, in his first term, there were the safeguards, there were the people in his, in the war room, in there with him to say, this is wrong, you are wrong. And they were promptly fired most of the time, but there were those safeguards. I'm afraid that those are now going away. And I'm afraid for what that means for democracy. And I think because of that, democracy is at risk. That's all I have to say. Thank you for having me on.
Emmett, thank you so much for that call. There are a lot of people, Vernon Burton, I'll go to you. There are a lot of people who do believe that. They say the safeguards aren't there this time. Look at the people that he's putting in this time, some of his impulses, to sort of have one set of rules for him and one set of rules for everybody else would be anti-democratic.
Well, one of the things and why I'm so glad that our caller, the 17-year-old student, is taking these AP government classes, we have a system of checks and balances, and let's hope it works. One of the things we've seen is the way Congress has been stalled, and the Supreme Court has done a lot of things I think it normally would not have, but checks and balances should work.
Let me go to Joseph, who's calling from Peedley, Missouri. Joseph, what do you think? Is democracy at risk with Trump retaking the White House?
Well, I mean, Trump, I see him kind of more as a symptom. I mean, he's a bit of a goofball. He couldn't really hang with any of the great statesmen of our past, but he does have the unique political talents that our time requires, like kind of tough-mindedness and a lot of all sizzle, no steak, media savvy. I think that the real threat to democracy as we have it right now, like the mass liberal democracy, is kind of built into the system. I mean, all of the people who are trying to lead us, worried about misinformation, are kind of right that a lot of people do get easily swayed. But that begs the question, should these people who, are, not even people who are totally, too dumb or crazy to vote, but just people like me who are too busy to keep up with everything. We're working 8 hours a day trying to keep the family together. The media power really is what can move the masses to vote for people and choose the direction of the country. I mean, I personally think that if we restricted the franchise to save democracy, I'd be happy to give up my right to vote, to labor peacefully under a just and wise and competent government rather than having to deal with these short-term, frenetic, bouncing back and forth
Okay, Jeremy, that's the threat to democracy right there. That's the threat to democracy. The view that the most people are too dumb to vote for their own interests. That's what they're
Jeremy,
too
we got
dumb and bigoted to be trusted. I think the Weimar stuff is massively overblown. We have 200 years of constitutional government. The resistance is not supposed to come from within the executive branch. It's to come from the Congress and the courts and the states and the media and everything else. And I was worried, very worried in 2016, but I've watched this process. And, the courts have fought back against both presidents. I don't think the recent court decision on immunity is anything like as sweeping as Vernon said it was. And he has a 1 or 2 seat majority in the House. Again, I repeat that. That's incredibly hard to force policies upon people they don't want. And certainly insofar as he was elected, he was replacing someone who was enforcing policies that people didn't want. Mass immigration, open borders was something no one wanted, but the Democrats gave us anyway because they thought it was good for us.
Tolliver. Tolliver. Hang on, Vernon. Let me just want to hear a couple of comments that are coming in here online.
They're very spicy. So Carmelia in Atlanta says the instability of the middle class as a threat to democracy is a great point that is actually illustrated quite colorfully in Squid Game Season 2. A two-party Democratic season can lead to conflict and at worst, bloodshed. Brian in Denver says the Federalist Society, Project 2025, these are all chipping away at our democracy. Trump is a useful idiot. Literally all the comments are this spicy. It's crazy. It's a big one today. And then let's go. Trump has substantial immunity and keeps pushing for that to apply to non-presidential issues. Trump bragged about being able to shoot someone and get away with it. Wild, wild, wild stuff today.
You can comment at listentothemiddle.com. Vernon Burton, you were about to say.
Yeah, I don't know if Andrew would agree with me or not, but my observation of the 2016 4 years of President Trump is I don't think that President Trump understands very well how government works. And so in some ways, that's a reassurance to me that he would not know how to undermine it very well, even if he intended. I'm not saying he intends to, but I think in support. You asked me earlier other periods, and just, I wasn't quite born then, but we had the McCarthy era. And of course, I grew up with the Jim Crow era of white supremacists. One thing that has bothered me, though, is except for the Civil War era, when people would refer to Abraham Lincoln as an ape or an animal, I think the language, even the white supremacist of the era of which I grew up in, the Jim Crow period, they never sort of demonized their opponents so much. They were within the political process, And I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but it is something I have some concern with because language is very important, I think. And the only other period I can come up with that I've looked at is before the Civil War and the Civil War Reconstruction era.
Yes, Jeremy,
yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
A democratically elected president could become a dictator, right? He would use an emergency, a disaster, the Reichstag fire in Germany, to seize power, to tell people we've got to seize this power because of order. Now, Trump was given two unbelievably good opportunities to do that. He was given an epidemic, which could have given him the power to use the federal government to control every part of our lives. Turns out he didn't really want to do that. In fact, he was kind of hostile to it. In the summer of 2020, when cities were burning and riots were going on, he could have sent the military in. He could have used that as a pretext. He didn't. So we've had two cases where he had it for the taking and looked the other way. The other thing is, he's not interested in going to war. You know, tyrants, people who want to destroy democracies, love wars. He's not one of the, he's a strange character because he's very anti-interventionist. He wants peace. He wants appeasement in many ways. So that's another reason I don't think he really wants to be a dictator or would have the ability to become one.
Stand by because, Tolliver, there are those people who say Donald Trump does not pose a threat to democracy, including people who otherwise criticize him quite a bit.
Yeah, his former national security advisor, John Bolton, is certainly no friend to Trump these days, but he doesn't think Trump is going to bring about the end of democracy.
We've had boiling points in this country. One was called the Civil War. We're nowhere close to that, rhetoric to the contrary notwithstanding. I think Trump could cause a lot of damage if he's reelected. I've been saying that for several years now. I do not think he is an existential threat to our democracy, and I think it's, in fact, harmful to say that. That's the kind of rhetoric I think we could do without.
Yeah, Tolliver, John Bolton really doesn't like Trump these days.
I've heard, yeah.
We'll be right back with more of your calls coming up on The Middle.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan, tonight 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here with my wife. Boom, boom.
This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drop better when I'm high. It heightens my senses,
calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This hour, we're asking you, is democracy really at risk as Trump retakes the presidency? You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out at listentothemiddle.com. I'm joined by Clemson University history professor Vernon Burton and political commentator Andrew Sullivan of The Weekly Dish. And the phone lines are full, so let's get to Alex in Atlanta. Alex, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
So I think there's a lot of ways you can look at it, and I'll try to take more of a centrist stance where there are a few presidents throughout the last 100 years or so even that you can look at that responded by using a lot of their power to take drastic measures. One example you can look at is FDR using the New Deal, packing the courts to get the New Deal passed through in order to sort of fix the Great Depression. And then you can look at like Ronald Reagan, who saw a lot of the economic turmoil in the 70s and then used his presidential powers to sort of go crazy with deregulation and pushing forward his conservative agenda. So I think that if Trump uses sort of the most of his power, you're going to get something maybe in between those.
So the presidential power and of course, Vernon Burton, the power of the presidency is bigger now than it has been, isn't it?
Well, and I'll be interested what Andrew thinks. We don't know yet what it is going to mean in terms of this ruling. That says the president's above the law, at least as long as his presidential duties thing has going to be interpreted. But if, as I read it, and with to make it clear, I had an amicus brief, in fact, which laid out the history, and the court just sort of ignored all the history and the precedents and everything to come to that ruling, but we really haven't had it tested yet. We'll have to see. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Andrew agrees or not with it. I go either way. I think I really
could. John Roberts has written that it's not meant to be that sweeping,
right?
And I don't think when you read it closely, it reads that way. But imagine, Jeremy, for example, and Vernon, that the president today said, "I'm going to get a whole bunch of legal citizens and put them in camps for 4 years. I'm going to get reelected 3 times rather. I'm going to have such a big majority in the Congress that I can do anything I want." That was FDR.
Right.
We had to have a constitutional amendment to prevent that happening again. It's just when you actually look at get some perspective on this, you realize that in fact, no, we may be moving away from the liberal democracy when we were able to have real conversations substantively, we were able to come together, the kind of conversation we're having now. We may be more in a more sort of rambunctious, polarized period. But this Constitution is a pretty good one. It has lasted really well. And we'll see how it does. It survived one term of Trump. And look, I do think that the attempt to squelch him, to get rid of him, to short-circuit democracy through the law or through other measures, backfired. And the American people said very clearly, we don't think he's a threat to our democracy. We're voting for him again. And I, in the end, trust their judgment. I do. I trust their judgment. If he does something crazy, and I want you to realize, I didn't vote for him either time. I've been one of the sharpest critics of him. I disagree with him on many issues. I think his rhetoric is insanely deranged. I think he should never be president, but I don't think he's going to destroy our democracy. That's all I think.
They could have had an ad with you in it for the Trump campaign saying that I don't like him, I didn't vote for him, but I don't think he's going to destroy the democracy. Let's go to Aaron, who's in Teton, Wyoming. Aaron, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, hi, thank you. It's an honor to be on with your two guests. Andrew, I follow you a lot, and I admire you a lot. I think you're brilliant. I do think you took a cheap shot to NPR, which I'm not real proud of you for that one.
I'm sorry.
Anyways.
It's irresistible.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. One of the things that Vernon mentioned, which is kind of what I think is more fundamental, what the risk is, that we don't talk about enough, is, you have in our society, especially now, with the diversity we have in every community, I think anyone that's grown up in the United States, I grew up in Virginia, Michigan, California, I'm in Wyoming. Everywhere I've been, I felt there was a level of tension among neighbors. It's just a natural thing that exists when humans try to live among humans. And it was your coach on the team, or the principal of the high school, or the city mayor, or the governor, or ideally the president that made civilized nations civilized, where we didn't have vitriol towards people that we didn't agree with. We could disagree, but we didn't get violent with them. And I think one of the roles of every president that's important to me when I vote is not so much even policies anymore, because they don't control as many policies as you think. There's a big government that does that. And quite frankly, policies change and they ebb and flow over the years. I think what's going to affect my life and my kids' lives more than anything is the attitude and the atmosphere and the tone of the nation. And if neighbors can live peacefully among neighbors, because the role models in our society make us realize they shame us if we're not behaving, and they praise us when we do act courteous to our neighbors. And I think the big risk with Trump is he viciously attacks people that he doesn't agree with in a hatred way, not a unfriendly way, in a hatred way. I mean, he called Gavin Newsom new scum in the middle
of the fires, and
in the middle of the fires.
Right.
So it's like, why would, if you start demonizing and start making people hate each other because they don't agree with you politically, they don't agree with you, they're from the blank hole countries, the immigrant, it's like,
no, we've got your point, Aaron. Let me take that to Vernon Burton. It's a very good point. What about that neighborliness and just sort of the tone of our politics? Is that in itself a threat to having the kind of democracy that we have in the United States?
Well, yes, it is. That's what I said about education. Is where I was going with the use of a term vermin in this. I said, I look back to see if that kind of language had been used before, and really just the Civil War. But I think there's something besides just the neighborliness and these sorts of things that is really important. There's another parallel we haven't talked about, and then the parallels that follow in history. What we have now parallels what was Mark Twain called the Gilded Age after Civil War Reconstruction, when what you had were extremes in wealth. And that's where we are going now, it seems to me. I hope I'm wrong, and we'll see what happens with the policies that are passed. But certainly with the first time, there was a reaction with the People's Party, commonly known as the Populist Party, that brought about a lot of reforms through the progressive era at that time. And I think there, and one other parallel for me is it reminds me of my own coming of age of the 60s, and when, in fact, young people decided that the generation before hadn't done a very good job and they're going to do something. You begin to have sit-ins and things like that. Mm-hmm. I really do think young people today are a little tired of looking and saying, look at all these old people who have been president. They have messed up. They have not done a good job. And I don't know which way it's going to go, but I do think there's a movement or the stirrings of a similar kind of time of the 60s among young people, particularly on things like the environment and other issues. It'll be interesting to see what happened and what comes out of it. Did that answer your question, Jeremy? I went off.
No, that was very interesting. Let me go to Brett, who's in Teutonia, Idaho. Brett, welcome to The Middle. Are you worried about democracy?
Well, you couldn't have picked a better person to get to following Jeremy, because he's just on the other side of the Tetons from me. But worried about democracy, that's a big word, probably with a lot of ways that you could look at it. But as far as the ability to vote, do I think Donald Trump's going to ruin our ability to have a fair and honest vote? Probably not. But what I do worry about is, and it was prior to Donald Trump, but is the introduction to the money level that is going on in our democracy, and also the lack of what seems to be our society, how we are educated on what is really going on, right? And it seems like a lot of people react to the last worst thing that they heard. Right?
Brett,
and that is, go ahead.
I was going to say that I want to ask Andrew about the money issue, because that's a really important one, and I also want to say the middle is obviously hot on both sides of the Tetons. So thank you for that, Andrew. What about that? That's the second caller that's brought that up. We've got Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, now having an enormous amount of sway. Is this oligarchy that Biden warned about in his goodbye address a threat?
Well, we should note it's bipartisan. That Kamala Harris raised much more money from a lot more oligarchs than Donald Trump does. And historically, Trump has kind of alienated a lot of those people. They're now coming around him because they want to suck up to him. Yeah, I don't think it's a good thing that these people exercise too much influence. I will happen, and I don't. And I don't like the access they buy, although it's not new, obviously. It's not like we haven't had this stuff many times before. I will say this, though. If you think that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are going to get on for 4 years, you have no idea. If you already Vivek is a casualty. Last week, Steve Bannon called Elon Musk an evil man. These people are not stable characters. They're big egos. I give them a few weeks before they blow up with Donald Trump and leave in disgrace. So and money affects all sorts of things. But money at this point, and the wealthy are far more on the Democrats' side than on the Republicans.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's true, I think, at this point, except for a few opportunists right now. But in general, that's the case. The Republicans become more of a working class party. And on questions like immigration, all the money people want more immigration. They want cheap foreign labor as much as they can get. So in some ways, Trump represents a resistance to that force of money.
This is sort of what I was talking about, Jeremy, in the parallel, because with the populist movement, he was no populist, but one of the worst racial demagogues. But it was a 1908 Tillman Act against what was then the large corporations or railroads that said you had to keep big money and particularly dark money out of politics. That when 2010 with Citizens United, I think, was one of the great mistakes of the Supreme Court, and one of the most dangerous things, much more so even than gutting of the Voting Rights Act and things like that, ultimately for democracy. At least that's the way I read it. But that's why I think there's going to be another pendulum swing because of this. It's exactly what happened after the Civil War in that other Gilded Age. You then had this age of reform, and I think that's part of what young people are going to be upset about. But I'm guessing, totally guessing. Historians are not prophets, so we'd make a lot more money. Andrew's a prophet. We'll hear from him.
Well, so because we have an all-male panel today, I'm glad that our next caller, Kim, is calling from East Texas to have a little gender diversity. Kim, welcome to the middle. Go ahead with your thoughts. What do you think democracy is at risk?
Hi. Yes, absolutely, I do. And I think the danger this time is from Project 2025 replacing people with experience in government with sycophants and loyalty to Trump. And I think that's what saved us, if you will, the first time around, and those guardrails are in the process of coming down. And I think we're in a lot of danger. Yes.
Kim,
and the money.
I don't think it's a threat to democracy for a president to have his own staff actually follow what he wants. I think it's a threat to democracy to have a class of bureaucrats who are actually so left-oriented and so in defense of the previous administration that they block and stymie the initiatives of the incoming administration. That is a danger to democracy. Democracy isn't endangered because your particular policy views are not in favor. It's endangered when people attempt to prevent democratic processes happening. And the bureaucracy and the administrative state does do that. It really does. It doesn't like certain things. It resists. Look at Trump's ability to even change immigration. It's been an incredibly hard lift. Now, I don't agree with getting rid of everyone and putting everybody into political appointees, but I do think there comes a point at which when the civil service is structurally opposed to you politically, you have a right to get people who will do what you want.
Let me squeeze one more call in, and Philip, who is calling from Pine Ridge, Colorado. Philip, welcome to The Middle. Your thoughts?
You posed a very interesting question tonight, and I'm glad you got to me. And I've got to say, I voted for Trump, first of all, but I would absolutely say that he is a danger to democracy. I've got to tell you why. People have been told for decades that the U.S. is a democracy, and it's not. It was set up as a constitutional republic. And Donald Trump has said many times in the past few years that he would restore the republic. And what people miss is that's why he's so loved, is because for the few of us that realize it's a constitutional republic, he's seen as a person who's going to restore the government to what it's supposed to have been.
Vernon Burton, that's a great one to go to you on. The U.S. as a constitutional republic, and we heard there from a Trump voter who says this is what we wanted.
Yeah, well, it is a republic, and that's how it works. But again, I go back to the rule of law, and my concern has been the sort of, I think this is the first time when you get down to it, to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court has been totally out of touch with where most Americans are on issues and things, particularly certain issues. As of late, and that worries me about a republic. But a republic is there to make democracy work. I think we're hanging up more on rhetoric than reality. Of course, it's a republic when you have something this large. But to go back to the beginning, the founding fathers did not see political parties. They didn't want them. They didn't see them coming. Maybe that was their fault. They should have. But I think that's made a huge difference, political parties, and the sort of lack of Congress to get things done has left a vacuum that has allowed a shift in this balance of powers. I fear. Again, I want to be careful. Andrew is certainly much more of a prophet than I am.
But you're gonna have the last word here, Vernon, because we've run out of time. So
let me be quiet.
Let me say thank you. Let me say thank you to both of you, Clemson University history professor Vernon Burton and political commentator Andrew Sullivan. You can subscribe to his Substack and podcast, The Weekly Dish. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. I learned a lot, Andrew. Thank you.
I had a blast.
Yeah, it was fun.
And we've got 2 new shows in the next week. We're live with a special on many stations on Inauguration Night, taking your calls. And then next week, I will be in Evansville, Indiana, with a focus on Trump's deportation program, which should be underway.
As always, you can call in at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. Or you can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter. And don't forget to check out our new video podcast on YouTube, where you can watch us as well as hear us.
The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmis-Dawes, John Barth, Annika Deschler, and Brandon Kondritz. Our technical director is Jason Croft. Thanks to our satellite radio listeners, our podcast audience, and the more than 420 public radio stations making it possible for people across the country to listen to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I'll talk to you next week.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969, Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drive better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather. In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to everybody.
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'm going back to my hometown to uncover the truth. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.